So the first one is to identify the decision, right? Because a lot of people get this wrong as well. They don't know what quite decision it is they've got to make. Is it a decision on this big thing? Is it a pre-decision? Is it a decision about the process? Is it a decision about the people when it comes to it? And actually, quite interestingly, that's the first thing I've wrote. So, is it a decision that's behavioural? That's the first thing to think. Or is it a decision that's process-based? Because they're two different things. And you need to identify what it is. Okay? So, if I give you the example, let's say a company needs a new CRM system, client relationship management system, okay? You've got people and process in there with that. You could make a logical decision about the CRM and put a new CRM in, but you also need a decision that's behavioural. How will people take to the new system? What is their input? Are they likely to go into fight, flight or freeze with a new system when going through change? And so on and so on. So the first thing you need to do is identify what type of, well, first of all, what is the decision? And make sure you get the right, what is it we need to decide here straight away? What is it that can wait? What is it that can move on? What information do we need first? And so on and so on. But is it a behavioural decision or is it a process decision? Okay? Really analyse and try and understand what it is you need to decide. Too many people, I suppose, go into fight or flight, probably more fight, and go in and make a decision that's not really a decision that needs making at that point. So really strip it all back and go, what decision do we need to make first? Then we'll move on to the next decision. Then we'll move on to the next decision. Rather than going, yeah, we'll do all of that, yeah, that's fine, yeah, it was great. Because there are decisions all the way along the way. And some of your decisions might change further down the line anyway, when you've got more information and so on and so on and so on. So, point number one, I've got another one in there, haven't I? Yes, okay. Get the right starting point. Okay, and what I mean by that is, like we said, make sure you identify the right decision. Very briefly, if you are at point A and you want to get to point B, some people would have seen me do this when we did goal setting, okay? You need to make sure that you're defining the right decisions to make here at point A in order to get you to point B. Sounds straightforward, doesn't it? But if you're not quite right making the right decisions at point A, then what happens is that the actions after the decision, they veer off and you get to point C instead of point B, okay? And for those that remember when we used this in goal setting, this causes, excuse me, an emergent strategy. It's called an emergent strategy. When we want to go there, but we haven't quite made the right decision or actually scoped it out properly in the first place, or we make a quick decision and rather than, because we don't like it, so we make a quick decision rather than making the right decision or identify the right decision, and all of a sudden we end up getting to C. And of course at that point you have a big gap between B and C on your hands, and you don't quite get where you want to go, okay? So we want to avoid that emergent strategy by spending time and making sure we're identifying the right decision. So that's point number one. Point number two, gather info. They're not in order, are they? Sorry. Gather information. Gather information, okay? So you need a fundamental understanding of things before making a decision. Okay, and this needs to be whether it's qualitative or quantitative. So again, people or process when it comes to it. If it's a people decision, then you need an understanding of the people that are involved, the impact it's going to have, and so on. If it's a quantitative or process driven decision, then you need to see the logical output of the process change, the process decision that you are making at that point, okay? Really understand and analyse, and again get the right starting point. Yeah, so you've got in the first two we've talked about number one, analysing, people, process, get the right starting point. Number two is gather more information, again analyse and get the right starting point on the back of it. Okay? So, done to number 3. So, number 1, make sure you know, is it the right, what's the decision, identify the decision. Number 2, gather information. Is it process? Is it people? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? Get as much information as you can. Now, I know sometimes decisions have to be made quickly. So when I say get as much information as you can, get as much information as you can within the time you have. Okay, everybody would like 3 or 4 days to make every decision and research it and make sure belt and braces you're doing the right thing. Sometimes decisions have to be made quite quickly. Gather the information you can within the time that you have before you make the decision. Okay. Number 3, identify alternatives. So now what you've done is you've identified the decision, you've gathered a load of information, and now what you're going to do is look at alternatives. So in other words, what you're going to do is, first of all, could you use an old decision? So could you use something that you've done before? Have you got any history around this particular thing? Have you got a recall memory from when this has been done before? That is one of the best, I suppose, checkpoints, if you like, when looking at alternatives. Have I got any evidence of this happening before? We call it using your recall memory. When you think in possibilities, you either use your recall memory first, or you then imagine what it could be second. Okay, because you've got recall back, imagine forward. And recall is the benchmark. Have I done anything like this before? What were the results? What did I learn from it? What can we apply here? Okay. However, got to be careful of making the same decision and getting what you've always got. So if you guys remember, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I've said that a number of times. So it's okay using some old information and making a decision, but if you need exactly the same result as last time. If you don't need exactly the same result, then you've got to do some possibility thinking. So we've got to now move to the new way of thinking and using your imagination rather than your recall memory. And you've got to generate some possibilities. How do you generate possibilities? You could do a mind storm or a mind map. I think it was last week we did mind mapping. Mind storming. I think that was last week. I showed you how to do a mind storm. If you want to know more about mind mapping, which is quite good before decision making to get all your thoughts down on paper, as well as mind storming, if you Google Tony Buzan, I might have mentioned it last week. Tony Buzan kind of coined mind mapping. You can have a look at that. Either way, whatever tool you use, this is the point where you think of possibilities. So you go, okay, so what are all the decisions? You've identified the decision, you've gathered information, but now you're going, well, just before we make the decision, are there any alternatives? What other possibilities are there out there? Okay, now so far in you might be thinking, bloody hell, there's 3 things there I've got to do. Sometimes I don't get as much time. It doesn't take very long to do this. Okay, I think I proved last week that you can generate over 30 plus ideas in 5 minutes. We did it live on the session where we did a mind storm. Okay, so it doesn't take long to do this if you have the right tools and techniques. Okay, also look for different points of view. This is where you would gather information from other people. Remember, you've got your filing cabinet. Other people have got their filing cabinets. So what you want to do is try and get other people's filing cabinets view before we make decisions sometimes. Okay? So that's number 3, identify alternatives. Number 4, weigh the evidence. So this is now where you're weighing things up. Okay? So you've identified the decision, you've started analysing it, you've started bringing in alternatives and other possibilities, other people's points of view, and now your job, because you're making the decision, is to weigh them up. Yeah? Weigh up what you think. And now this will then be based on your filing cabinet again. So this is now going to go back into your filing cabinet because that's what the decision's got to be made on if you're making the decision, and you're changing those possibilities into priorities. So if you remember in goal setting, you've got possibilities, priorities, plan. It's the same in decision making. Once you've generated all the possible alternatives, you then weigh all of them up and then you start to prioritize them, and you prioritize them by weighing them up. That one, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, I could do that, I could do that, I could do that. And then, of course, before you move on to the next bit in a moment and start to make a plan around it, okay? So weighing them up is really, really important. What are the fors and what are the againsts? Okay? So it's something that my dad always uses this is. If ever I've got a problem in my head, and my dad's a great sounding board for me, I know all this stuff. I know what to do. I teach it, you know I do. But whether I use it all the time, sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need other people, helping you with stuff. So, I've got a problem. I talk it over with my dad. And my dad simply says, get a piece of paper, son. Fors and againsts. And just fill in both columns. And I know what he's going to say. And sometimes it's annoying when he says it. But actually, it's really quite useful. What are the fors? What are the againsts? Weigh it up, make a decision based on it, yeah? And of course, if you do the weighing up after you've done a bit of thinking about all the possible alternatives, okay, then you're in a better position to weigh up, okay? This kind of leads on to number 5. And number 5 is then choose an alternative. Now, it's not particularly worded very well, this, because what it suggests is choose an alternative to what you were thinking in the first place. That's not what I'm getting at here. Basically, what this means is now make the decision. Choose which one of those you've been thinking about. Okay? Make the decision. Okay? Because you've done all that weighing up in your head. Yeah? Hopefully you haven't been doing that for weeks because you've set a date to do it and you've given yourself some time to think about it, and then you've gone and weighed it up and done it. Remember how quickly people generated possibilities on the session that I did last week if you're on it. 5 minutes, 300 seconds, and we had over 180 ideas. Even if you take out half the crap, we had over 90 ideas in 5 minutes. Now, generating 90 ideas in 5 minutes, to some people, they feel like it's impossible. It's not impossible. You've just got to think about it in a slightly different way, yeah? So, when you've got all of those ideas and that possibility thinking, and I very rarely make decisions now without possibility thinking. So if I've got a problem and I need to make a decision on it, yeah, piece of paper and a pen, how could I possibly solve this problem? 40 answers. Okay, get rid of the crap. That leaves me with the priorities. Weigh up the priorities. Yeah, maybe get 1 or 2. Then maybe I do a for and against if I need to, either quickly in my head or write it down. And then I make a decision. And I choose the decision that I'm going to make. And through that process of elimination, I make the decision. Is it the right decision? Time will tell, won't it? If anybody's ever worried about making the right decision, okay, I remember once going into work. It was during my first divorce, okay? As you know, I've obviously had hundreds of divorces, but there you go. It was during my first divorce. And I remember going in and sitting down, and a boss of mine, a bit of a mentor, actually the person that got me into doing this for a living, okay, 20 odd years ago, Mike his name was. I came in and I was a bit upset, I was a bit stressed. I had to end my marriage. It was my decision to do it. Things weren't right. I'd procrastinated for a long time and I had to make a decision, and I just couldn't bring myself to making the decision. And I remember sitting down with my boss, Mike, and my boss went, right, come on, we need to sort you out. What's the matter? So I told him, and he said, right, well, you need to make a decision. I said, I know that, Mike. I said, but what happens if I make the wrong decision? And Mike went, well, you won't. And I thought, well, first of all, that's a bit arrogant to say. I said, well, how stupid. I said, what do you mean I won't? And he said, you always make the right decision. And I thought he was being nice to me. And I went, well, thanks, Mike, I appreciate that. And he went, no, you don't understand. He said, everybody always makes the right decision. I said, what? What are you on about? I said, I've made some howlers in my career. What do you mean I always make the right decision? He said, we only know we've made the wrong decision with hindsight and learning. And as long as you don't repeat the same mistake, then you're okay. Everybody makes mistakes. If you make a decision and it's the wrong one, if you go back in 10 years' time, if you could go back to that same place, but you only knew what you knew at that moment, there was no hindsight. If you knew what you knew at that moment and the way you felt, you'd make the same decision again. So you always make the right decision. And I came out of that meeting with my head a little bit boggled, because it's not arrogant going, well, I always make the right decision. It was actually going, do you know what? I made the decision at the time with the way I felt, with the information I got. If it wasn't the right one, it wasn't the right one. And do you know what it did is it took massive pressure off me at that point to go, it's okay to make mistakes. The key is, if you did make a wrong decision in your perception with hindsight, the key is to learn from that and adapt and not to make the same mistake again. That's where the real win comes in decision making. Not whether you've made the right or wrong decision. Yeah? God, I've made some howlers in my time, guys. Believe me, I've made some right howlers, not just personal, work ones. Yeah? Made some right howlers. Yeah? I left a job to go into a new, I've gone from leisure to retail. I took a £10,000 pay cut because I wanted retail experience as well as leisure experience. And by the third day in my new job, I walked out. No job, with a mortgage, family. I walked out. Boy, did I think I'd made the wrong decision. Yeah, boy, did I beat myself up for the wrong decision. In fact, before I left the job in leisure, I'd not only taken a £10,000 pay cut, but that boss at the time offered me another £7,500 to stay. So I'd actually effectively taken a £17,500 pay cut to go into another industry to get, and then 3 days later I walked out because I didn't like it. Wasn't for me. Now, that is a howler of a decision. Did I learn from it? Absolutely. And quite interestingly, was it the right decision long term? Well, in 3 weeks I go down and run a 2-day program for that same boss. That's not my boss anymore. He's an ops director of a company, and he's used me for the last 10 years because I've got a great relationship with him, and I left and I didn't burn any bridges, even though I did leave. So sometimes you think, have I made a howler? Yes, you might have made a howler, but how can you learn from it and adapt and do things differently next time? Yeah? Certainly when I went for a next job, I got more information about the job, I fundamentally understood it, I actually offered to go in and work for a little while so I could see what happened in the business before I made a snap decision to go and get another job, because it wasn't the job they promised me in the interview. Yeah? So, we've all made howlers, but you always make the right decision at the time with the information and the emotions that you've currently got. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but you don't have it at the time you make decisions. So please take that as take some pressure off you, make the decision, and if it's the wrong one, learn from it and don't make it again. There's not much more as human beings that we can do other than that, because we don't have an all-seeing eye. We can't see every single scenario play out in front of us. So again, hopefully that tip's been useful for us, useful for yourself. But I thought my boss was weird when he went, you always make the right decision. And then he explained what he meant by it, and I thought, yeah, of course, everybody always makes the right decision at the time. But in hindsight, you might not want to make that decision. Now, whether other people make the right decision, in your opinion, that's different, because they've got a different filing cabinet to you. So I'm not on about other people's decisions. I'm on about your decisions at the time, okay? Hopefully that's taking a bit of pressure off, yeah? So make a decision. Once you've made the decision, don't question it. You've made the decision, go with it. If it's wrong, learn by it, but don't go, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that, you idiot, I shouldn't have done that. What's the point? You've done it. There's no point beating yourself up. You're going to have problem-focused self-talk that's going to lead, as you know, to problem-focused emotions and actions and results on the back of it. So the decision went pear-shaped. How can I learn from it? How can I apply something different in the future to put it right? Okay? Based on the first 4 steps you are making, you will make the best possible decision. So based on analysing, thinking about what you've seen in the past, getting other people's points of view, by doing all of that, you will make the best decision that you possibly can at that moment in time, okay? Number 6, take action. Have I got number 6 twice? Hang on a second. Yeah, I got my 6 twice. There is 7, I am right, there is 7. So, number 6, once you've done all that, you've got to take some action on your decision. Okay? Simple, straightforward, got to take some action. By the way, once you've taken action, you'll feel better. Okay? Because if you're in that freeze, in that procrastination zone, once you take some action on it, you will start to feel better because you can start moving forward. Okay? Action will probably mean a change though. So bear this in mind. If your decision means somebody else is going to be impacted by change, then you've got to remember the transition curve, because they're going to go through it. So bear that in mind. There might be an adverse reaction. Excuse me, sorry, I didn't know that was on. There might be an adverse reaction to your decision because of people going through that transition curve. Now, I haven't got time to go into the transition curve again today, but we've done it loads. So go on the YouTube channel that we've made for you and have a look for that. But your decision might put people into change. So just bear that in mind, okay? You might have to help them through transition, okay? Helping with change, like I've said. There's 3 things to help people with change: information, involvement, and individual attention. You'll probably remember those 3 things from sessions that I've done in the past. If you want to help somebody through change and your decision might mean something changing, give them as much information as you can, involve them even in the decision making if you can, rather than just afterwards as well. And you might have some people that need some one-to-one attention to help them get their head around it, okay? And finally, number 7, review your decision. So when it's all said and done and you've made the decision and you've taken action on the decision, measure, measure, measure. And the reason that you need to measure is because you need to know whether your decision was good, not so good. You need to learn from it, you need to adapt, or you can make the same decision in the future and get a good result from it. People don't like to be measured, remember, it holds them to account. But without measurement, you don't know whether your decision's any good on the back of it. So you can measure, and you can learn from your measures, whether that's qualitative or quantitative. Learn from those measures, adapt and apply for the future, okay? And then make some more decisions, because that will just be one decision that you've made, and now you need to go and make a whole ream more decisions for the rest of the day or week or month or year or whatever it may be.